All set.
I will go ahead and share my screen. So welcome all to today's session. We are looking at successfully lifting off your course, which is really about getting your course ready for the start of the semester and prepping it so that you'll be better prepared. And a good start to the semester means less issues throughout the semester, which we like. So to start with, I'm going to share out our latest version of our Prepping a Bright Space course for the next semester. Eventually, this will be modified into a website, but the information in it should be accurate. And basically what we're going to do is just walk through this. So the very first thing that you're going to want to do when you're getting your course ready to go is simply copy your course. Now, this is presuming that this is not the first time that you've offered a course. Obviously, if it's the first time you're offering a course, you would simply build the course from scratch. But what you're going to want to do is go to Brightspace and log in and find the course in your course list that you want to copy the material into. Normally, this course will not be open to students at this point in time, so you'd have the little inactive tab in it. And the first thing I always check is to make sure that it is actually an empty course. So I would look into my table of contents, and ideally this would be completely empty. So I am actually going to go ahead and do that. It should only take a second, just so that you'll see what that should look like. So now you'll see that when I go into the course, there is nothing there. That's an important check because one of the things that's harder to repair is when you have two courses copied into a single course shell and you end up with duplicates of everything, and it's a manual process to sort that all out. So to copy the course, what I'm going to do is go to Course Tools and Course Admin. And then I'm just going to find Import, Export, Copy Components. And I'm going to search for offerings. And you'll see I get this little pop-up. If you know the course you want, you can search it directly, or you can just hit search and it will pull up every course that you have access to. That's a little bit unwieldy for me, so I'm going to go find one of my coworkers' courses and copy that. So I hit add selected. It's going to ask me, is this the course I want to get? And then it's going to ask me, do I want to copy everything or only selected components? We're going to go ahead and copy everything. And it's going to think. So while that is thinking, I want to start talking about making planned courses to the change. So once the copy is completed, the next thing you're really going to want to do is start hunting down the things that you want to change. And apparently my colleague has cleared out her course, which I did not expect. Thanks, Carrie.
Sorry about that. I was thinking, I wonder what's in there.
Yeah, I'm used to you having something in there.
Well, that's a new function one. My other one has a bunch of stuff in it. Mocyk.
Yeah. I always want to sing that to the alphabet song when I hear it too. All right, try that again real quick. So it may actually be useful for you to make a list before you start updating, just a checklist to say, okay, what do I want to update? We do have a list of some of the common areas that we would be looking at updating. One of the big things is reflecting on what happened in the previous semester when you offered the course. Were there any areas that students had issues with that you think could use some more instruction, some more clarity, some more context, etc.? Next is usually simply, is there anything that needs to be updated? And that really depends on the nature of your course. Is it a course like mathematics where things don't really change all that often? Or is it a current world history course where things are changing on a daily basis? One of the other big reasons that you would see a change in the course would be if you're changing textbooks. And then you want to consider, okay, obviously I need to change the textbook information in the course, but do I need to change my assessments or my tests to reflect the new book that I'm using? Another thing to reflect on is, are you satisfied with the way that your students are receiving feedback and with the level of feedback that they are receiving? And do students seem happy with that? There are a lot of feedback settings in Brightspace, so there's a lot of different options for what students see when. And last but not least, at least for the examples I have, are the discussions that you're using, if you're using discussions, producing the engagement with students that you were hoping for? And are they still relevant? This is one area where if you want to work on your discussions, the instructional designers are always happy to act as sort of a reflecting board for you. You can bounce ideas off of you. We can help you shape discussion questions to generate the outputs that you want. And it actually tends to be one of the things that we have a bit of fun doing because there's a fair amount of creativity involved. So this course has been copied now. So now when I go to content, I can see I actually have stuff there and I can start editing stuff. Editing stuff in most cases is as simple as finding what you want to edit and simply viewing it. And then once you're inside of it, you can edit whatever it is that you want to edit. Now, despite the fact that we've been on Brightspace for a little while, we actually do still run into references to legacy items. So the most common one these days is there'll be a reference to Blackboard hiding somewhere. I'd be surprised to see an Angel reference. But in one case, I actually found a Lotus Notes reference in a course last year, which is from a system that predated even Angel. Another thing is that the SUNY Service Desk likes changing its name every so often. So currently, the service system that we use through SUNY is called SUNY Online. So it's the SUNY Online Help Desk. And generally, you want to make sure that any instructional materials, like how you submit an assignment or participate in a discussion or anything like that, are for Brightspace and not for one of the previous systems. Last but not least, for this section, we at one point encouraged every faculty member to have an ask a question section in every module. What we found over time is how often these get used are really a reflection of how much the faculty pushes for them to be used. So if you want your students to use this, make sure it's located in the modules and make sure you are essentially advertising it and telling students you want them to use it. If you don't want to use it and you simply want students to contact you through the course mail system, then go ahead and delete all the references out of the course. What you don't want is links to ask a question or references to an ask a question discussion forum when there is no forum. Next, check out your icebreaker module, or if you don't have an icebreaker module, I'd encourage you to create one. We don't really have the time in today's session to walk through the benefits and ways of handling an icebreaker module, but particularly in online courses, it gives a sense of community that's often lacking. And I do have a link built into the document that goes out to Cornell and has some information about what types of icebreakers you might use, and also just how these icebreakers are useful in building inclusive classrooms. Again, this is another thing where the IDs are more than happy to assist you in adding icebreakers or brainstorming ideas for icebreakers for your course. The next big one is making sure all of the dates are updated in your course. This is probably one of the most common issues that we see with a course. We'll get notes that students can't see material, and we'll go in and we find out that date didn't get changed from example 2023 to 2024. But it's also worth noting that if you have due dates that are from a previous semester, those can start telling students, hey, this assignment that is your final project that is actually due in March of 2024. Oh, that was due in September of 2023, and it's now late. So there's nothing to freak out students quite like logging in and getting a whole bunch of late notifications. So if you are using release dates, this is super important. But what a lot of people like to do is also put manual dates in their course. So for example, I might say, okay, module 1 is going to run from 120 to 127. Now, on the one hand, this is really nice because it's very easy for students to glance and say, oh, yeah, okay, that's where I need to be in the course right now. But it is another thing that you have to remember to update, and it has to be updated manually. Now, for release dates and due dates, we have a better option. And again, the documentation for this is listed in here, but it's a tool called the Date Manager. So what we would do is go to Course Tools, Course Admin, I'm sorry, if that was a question for me, I couldn't hear it at all.
No, sorry, it's just some noise in the.
Okay, no problem. And I go to this manage dates link. Now, initially, this will be very overwhelming because it will literally show anything that can have a date. But even in this context, it can be very useful simply to scroll through and make sure that everything is in the right year. So I'm immediately seeing due dates that are from 2022 and release dates that are from 2022. That's not necessarily a good thing. So I can take note of those. Depending on what it is, I might even adjust on the fly. So like this quiz, well, I know these were actually supposed to be 2024. So I can just change them on the fly. And that will save them. And I'm not sure why only one of them updated though. Oh, it's because I didn't update the due date first, so there's a conflict. So I'm just gonna remove the due date. Same thing, if there's dates I don't want, I can get rid of them just by clicking X. And again, all I'm doing to edit the dates is to click on them. Now, if I have an entire course that was offered maybe a year ago, and I just want to update all the dates, I can bulk up, or I can bulk offset the dates. Bulk editing dates will change everything to the same date. So it would just say, okay, what dates do you want? And it will change everything that is check marked to that date. Or I can use bulk offset dates, in which case I'm going to offset all of my dates forward by 365 days. And I would save that. And what that does is it simply shifts everything forward 1 year, and then I can tweak it from there without having to worry about making sure every 2023 has been changed to 2024. Now, to make this more manageable, after I do my general scan, what I usually do is go back up to the top and grab specific tools. For example, I can look at all my assignments and just focus on the due dates for those. So there is ways to make the dump of the information more manageable there. Now we sort of touched on this next part. Oh, I'm sorry. Also with managed dates, you do want to keep track of the academic calendar. Remember that for online courses, even though they are online, you should not be having stuff due on days when there are no classes on main campus. So a good example of that is Quest Day. There are no classes on campus, so you should not have anything due even in an online asynchronous course on Wednesday, April 17th. Similarly, I tend to find it easier to work out my entire schedule for the semester using a spreadsheet, which I then post as the course schedule for a quick glance for students, then go in and do the dates. But if you find it easier, you could certainly set up everything from the date manager and then copy it out of the date manager into a spreadsheet. Okay, so moving on to updating the textbook and course materials. Again, if you are changing your textbook or any other information, you obviously want to make sure that those changes are propagated throughout the course. The other thing, though, is to make sure that any materials that you are using are still available, and that's mostly things like OERs and stuff like that. Make sure that you have not, or that they have not changed. Some things, most notably Red Shelf and some of the library resources, do require additional setup. A lot of that is handled automatically, but if you're having problems with it, or with the library resources in particular, those need to be renewed every semester. So you'll just want to send a note to help@oswego.edu, and we'll get it fixed for you, or we'll send you in the right direction. For library resources, though, I would actually go to their little learning module on how those are embedded and what resources they have to support you. Next thing we have is really checking academic policy statements. So there are 3 statements that should be in your syllabus or in your course information for all courses. These are what resources are available for students that support accessibility, a link to the academic integrity policy, and a link explaining the Clery Act and Title IX reporting. However, there are a few additional documents that are useful to have. One is the complaint process, another is the standards and policies, and the last one's just the procedures and regulations. Now, in this case, we have something kind of cool. If you click this link, it is actually set up so that it will automatically copy these documents into your Google Drive. And then from there, you can link or copy them into your course piecemeal. Next is the gradebook. This is another area where we often see tweaks need to be made or corrections need to be made, especially if the assignment or gradebook is being changed. So what we're going to do is just go to Course Tools Grades, and there are 2 ways to access this. You can do it through Course Tools, or you can do it through Course Progress. And the first thing you'll see is your class grading screen, but what we actually want to go to is Manage Grades, which will show us basically a map of everything that is in the course. Now, you'll note that I have a bunch of notes up here. These are not necessarily errors, but they're telling you things that look a little strange to the system. Unfortunately, there's no way to dismiss them, but if you understand what an error means, you can ignore it. Like, I happen to know that the fact that all of the things that are in my extra credit category adding up to 10%, not 100%, is perfectly fine. These notes do not stop the gradebook from working, but you do want to make sure that you understand what they mean if you aren't able to get rid of them. So the first thing I'm going to do is just check my categories, which are these indented ones, and make sure that everything is in the right category. Now, I happen to see I've got a whole bunch of assignments that are not in any category. I don't actually know why that is, but I'm going to go and put a bunch of them into the category they belong in. And obviously, I'm just throwing them in random categories, but that's fine. Next thing I'm going to do is look for any empty columns that no longer need to be here. I can tell an empty column because it will have no association to it. So you can see this is attached to a discussion, whereas this is not. Now, if you are using manually graded columns, they will also appear this way. So make sure it is actually something you want to get rid of. Similarly, I happen to have some empty categories. So to clear those out, I'm just going to go more actions and delete and just find some stuff that I want to get rid of. Now, one thing that's kind of cool is if something is attached to something in the grade book, which you can tell quickly by seeing that it has a question mark on it, I cannot click that because that exists in the course. I would have to go delete that item in the course. So in this case, I'd have to go find and delete assignment 1, then come back to the grade book and delete it. That's also how you get most of these empty assignments is you delete the assignment and then you just have a random grade book column that has nothing in it. I'm going to get rid of those. And then it's just real easy. Are all of my associations working? For example, every now and then I might have a discussion that loses its association, and I know I actually still want it, so I need to go fix that. Do all of my points match what I want them to be? And most commonly, that's going to be looking, okay, are these all worth the same amount? And in this case, I'm using what's called a percentage-based system. So I would ideally want all of my category values, which are the ones that really matter, to equal 100% because it's a weighted gradebook system. I want it to equal 100%. Obviously, this one does not. So obviously, I'd have some work to do in fixing this. If I was using a points-based gradebook, I would not see this final column. Instead, I would just be looking at this number, and I would want to make sure that that adds up to the number I want it to add up to. Last but not least, I want to make sure that everything that I want students to see, they can. And if I don't want students to see something, they can't. And that is this little eye icon here. If you see this, students cannot see that gradebook column. And the main reason you might use that is if you have something like a pretest that's not graded, but you want to be able to use the gradebook to view that people did it, I might hide a column from them like that. And that's as easy as grabbing the pull down next to the item and making it visible or invisible to students. Now, in general, the gradebook is probably the most complicated portion of everything in Brightspace. So what I would recommend is that you use this list as a spot check, but that if you see a problem, that you follow up with one of the instructional designers. It's much easier for us to get it set up properly rather than try to fix it. This is triply important, if that is a way of saying things, if this is a live course. There are ways for you to delete or accidentally clear student submissions or even entire columns in a live course. So please, if you have any problems or questions with the gradebook, especially in the live course, come see us. We are more than happy to help. So next we have this checking all external links. The sad fact is that links can break. YouTube videos can get taken down for any number of reasons. E-reserve links might be created improperly. A red shelf links may not go to the right course. Every now and then there's random errors with Panopto, so please just check your links, just run through the course, and if you see a link, click it. I actually tend to recommend doing this on a weekly basis, paired with the module. So I'm not saying every week go through the entire course, but right before a module opens, just go to that module, look for any external links. So here's a YouTube link, and just make sure that it's working. And this one seems to be working fine. And sorry, I'm missing my control bar was covering up my ability to get out of that video. The other thing you can check is, again, under course tools and course admin, there is a link checker. I just have to find where it is. Not sure why I don't see the link in course tools, but it also shows up on your home page under updates. It will tell you if there is a broken link in the course, but this is a reactive system because it will say, hey, we noticed somebody clicked on a link and it didn't work. You may want to check this out, and you'll get a little flag that just says one broken link. So that's another way of finding them, but I would recommend doing the pre-checks and trying to be proactive about it, because if you're seeing it on this page, that means some student has already found the broken link. Next thing, a lot of us do use groups in our courses, and those groups do get copied over, but they do not automatically get populated. So at the beginning of your course, or at least when you're ready to start using groups, you can just go to the groups page, find your groups. Oh, you only have one group in here. Okay, I'm gonna pretend. There we go. So by default, in a new course, there would be no members in these groups. I don't know if it will let me. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly unenroll these users. So what I would do is go into content, find my groups. And then I can, and what I would do is, rather than going into the group, I would find the group title, which they call a group category, and I would enroll users. And this lets me enroll users for all of the groups at once. Now, unfortunately, there is no way that I am aware of to randomly generate group membership for groups that already exist. So if you want to manually enroll groups, randomly enrolled groups, what you'll want to do is delete your previous group. And you do that through the category and just create a new category. And use the auto enroll functions here. And the downside to doing it this way is then anything that uses groups. So let's say I had a group assignment here, which I do. I have to go to that assignment and manually add the group in that I back in that I want to use. So deleting a group that is associated with an assignment or discussion or anything else will not delete that assignment or discussion, but you will need to add the new group that you create to it. So again, if you have any questions or issues with that, please feel free to follow up with us. But really, it's a question of just deciding, is it easier for me to manually assign students, or is it easier for me to automatically assign students but have to manually reattach the assignments? Next, we hit cleaning up announcements. By default, all of your announcements come over, and unless you have end dates on them, they will all show up. Unfortunately, the announcements have been cleared from here. But you'll see that I do have a super check mark, so I have two options. I can simply see as many announcements as I want and use the super check mark. Or if I have announcements that I regularly use, I can hide them until I'm ready to use them. And that's as easy as changing the start date to something silly like 2026. So nobody is going to see that announcement. Or if I want to automate announcements, like I know every Monday I use this particular announcement, I can go back to that date management tool. And you'll see under specific tools, I can actually pull up announcements. So I could go through and reset all of my announcements. So every Monday, the announcement gets dropped automatically and I don't have to worry about it. The only random warning I'll give there is don't promise anything in your automatic announcements. So don't drop an announcement that says, by Wednesday, I'll have this graded, because you never know, as Carrie likes to say, life happens. And so you don't want to promise something in an automated announcement that life might interfere with. So as we begin wrapping this up, you really want to have a printable version of your course syllabus, even in a fully online class. All of the information in your printable syllabus will generally be covered in your course information folder, but you do want a copy that students can print out if they so wish for offline access. Now you can either build this simply by copying the stuff from your course information. If it already exists, you can just update the information, just make sure everything matches. That's the one thing with having information in two different places. You really don't want it to not match. Or you can do it reverse. And again, if you click this link, this will give you a copy of our accessible syllabus template that you can fill out and then go the other way and copy the information out of this into the various sections of your course information documents. Once you're all ready, it is never a bad idea to preview it so that you can see what students see. There is a session specifically on this, but the short version is you click on your name and you'll see a link to view this as a student. Now, this is not viewing it as any particular student in your course. This is simply viewing it as if you were a student. And that means there is some limits to the functionality, but it generally lets you know, okay, are students seeing what I want them to see? And are the things that I want hidden from students hidden from students? And to get out of that, you just click your name again and click the X, and it will revert you to your regular faculty view. Once all of this is done, we can finally open our course. Now, as a quick warning, when you're looking on the front page, so you see your list of all of these courses, again, you will see an inactive tag on any course that is not open. And to open that course, there's a couple different ways, but what we usually do is, again, go into the course, go to Course Tools and Course Admin. And this time we're going to click Course Offering Properties, and we're looking for this little checkbox. So as soon as you check this box and click Save, your course becomes visible to students. The catch is that this front page can sometimes take a little while to process. So this inactive tag may not disappear for 5 to 10 minutes. But again, as soon as you click that check mark and click Save, your course is open. And then we usually recommend that you send a welcome email to your students, just letting them know, hey, the course is open. You're welcome to come in and start checking out stuff. You can also do this through the announcements tool once the course is open. If you go into your course and create an announcement, this announcement will be sent as an email notification to students. So that's another way to communicate with them. We generally recommend opening your course during preview week, which is the week before the course officially starts. If you're able to open it on Monday, or in this particular week, it's Tuesday because of Martin Luther King Day, that's great, but try to get it open no later than Thursday, because it gives your students a chance to, one, make sure that they're able to access their course and that they are not having any problems in doing so. And it also gives them that chance to hit the ground running, because they can review the syllabus, potentially participate in the icebreaker activity, and really just start getting into the rhythm of things and know what to expect. The one thing you cannot do is have anything officially due during that first preview week. No work can actually be due until the first day of class. And even with icebreaker activities, usually I would give them a couple days to get into that, because students are not actually required to enter until the first day of the class. Preview for them is optional. Finally, as I've noted several times throughout this, the IDs and what we refer to as the DLE support team, that includes Kathy Dutton, can all be contacted through help@oswego.edu. or through our Zoom office hours, which are on the DOE Help and Support page. And you'll be able to talk to either myself, Carrie Mocyk, who joined us today, or Kathy Dutton. And we will do our absolute best to help you with any questions, or to simply offer somebody to bounce ideas off of. So I think that wraps up you having to listen to me. So are there any questions? Or Carrie, do you have any comments, anything that you can think to add or anything that I missed?
Nothing comes to mind.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the presentation.
Well, I hope it was useful. Almost everything that I talked about has links to instructions or further information in that document I shared. But again, we're always happy to have people talk to us directly.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then I think we're ready to stop the recording and call it quits. If anybody's in the CELT office. She must be in one of the other rooms. Well, anyways, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, there she is. You all set?
Yep.
All right, have a good one.